You're very welcome to our very first episode of Centre Ground for 2021. And tonight we're putting the spotlight on cultural integration. And my guests are Shaykh Dr.Umar Al-Qadri, who is the chair of the Irish Muslim Peace and Integration Council. And then we have Mayor Tim, who is a human rights activist. And finally, we have Julia O'Reilly, who is a traveller activist from the Midlands. And as always, in the second half of the programme, we discuss the hot topic of the week. And to chair that discussion, we have, as usual, Dr. Peter Dunne. But before we begin, just can I put a call out? The Irish Inquiry are seeking some assistance. You can go to the Irish Inquiry website. There's a drop-down box, Help Us, and there you can make contact with the Irish Inquiry offering help. Perhaps you have technical skills that you can share with us. The Irish Inquiry doesn't receive any funding, any advertising, and if you have a few euro that will help pay the light bill, that will be welcome too. And so to tonight's programme, as I have said, my first guest is Shaykh Dr. Shaykh Dr.Umar Al-Qadri, who is the chair of the Irish Muslim Peace and Integration Council. My apologies, Shaykh, for
fine. You're grand.
I'm trying to memorize new names, but of course you're not new to me, because I first saw you on the Tommy Tiernan programme a couple of years ago, and then when I was making a radio documentary, Taste the Pure Drop, documenting my journey down the River Shannon, the Flame of St. Bridges, I contacted you and you took part in that programme. So, and you've kindly agreed to take part tonight. So thank you so much.
You are very welcome.
So can we begin? Maybe you might tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to live in Ireland.
Well, I was born in Pakistan, and at the age of 2, I moved to the Netherlands. My father was one of the early imams to the growing, at that time, Muslim community in the Netherlands. So I grew up in Holland. I went to school there. And when I was in the secondary school, I decided that I wanted to learn more about the faith that I grew up with. And I wanted to learn in particularly the meaning of the revelation of the Quran. As a young child who was only 11, I had memorized the whole Quran, the complete scripture by heart, but I did not know what it meant. So for me, I really wanted to know, what the scripture says, and I wanted to know the meaning of it. So I traveled to Pakistan and I spent 7 years there. I studied there and I completed my religious and theological studies. And then I moved to the Netherlands for a few months. And unfortunately, when I got married and I was still studying in my final year, 9/11 happened in America, in the US. And the tragic incident, 9/11, had an impact on almost everybody in the world, and particularly even on me, because I wanted my wife, who lived in Pakistan, who was a Pakistani national. I was a Dutch national. I wanted her to join me, and I wanted to apply for family reunification. But unfortunately, the embassy in Pakistan of the Netherlands closed down indefinitely due to the global situation and the emergence of terrorism, unfortunately, and extremism. So at that time, my next plan was, because I wanted to pursue my studies in English. So I was about to move to England, but it so happened that I thank God, did not go to England, and I happened to got an amazing opportunity in Ireland, in Dublin at that time, and I moved to Dublin. Having moved here from the Netherlands was in the beginning quite challenging, but because at that time there weren't many Muslims, there weren't many people that I could relate to, and this I'm speaking into about 2004, and it was quite interesting.
Yes.
And I moved here, and since then, for the past 17 years, Ireland is home now, and I love Ireland dearly, and I would never want to go back to the Netherlands again from Ireland. Ireland is home, and that's it. My children are born here, they grew up here, they go to school here, and this is where our future is.
And of course, many people will now recognize you from the Eid Festival, which was held last summer in Croke Park. And of course, you were to the fore in organising that. Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, because of COVID-19, 2020 has been a very difficult year for everyone and every community, particularly faith communities have been hit. Many faith communities weren't able to have their festivals, have their gatherings, social gatherings, and traditions that they normally would have in congregation. They weren't able to have those kind of gatherings and celebrations and festivals. So the first Eid, which in the Islamic calendar, we have two events that are similar to Christianity, is Christmas. So we have two celebrations, annual celebrations called Eid. The first Eid, we were all at home. The mosques were closed, like the churches. There were no congregational prayers. And then I saw a picture on internet that went viral, where the Germans had opened the IKEA parking for the Eid prayers for their Muslim citizens. And this was somewhere in Germany. When I saw that picture, I thought to myself, having lived in Ireland for a long time, I thought Ireland can do better than that. The Irish are definitely better.
Yes.
Opening a parking space, opening up and facilitating a prayer in the parking space of IKEA, I didn't find that to be really a big deal, although it was a kind gesture. But I thought for Irish standards, that was not really something that I would call an Irish kind gesture to the other or to the new Irish. So I thought, let's suppose if the next Eid, which happened in the end of July, I thought maybe we would still be in the situation. We would still be in the pandemic, and we are still in the pandemic, although it's 2021 now. A year has passed. So at that time, I approached Croke Park because I thought to myself that the most iconic, the most historical venue, open-air venue in Dublin is Croke Park. I approached the management. They were very welcoming, and we had an amazing, I personally, I felt really honored. I felt welcomed. The Muslim community, we had a few weeks before, we had lost one of our community members, a doctor, in the battle against COVID-19. He was one of the first healthcare workers that had passed away against, while they were working in healthcare. So we, as a community, we were affected by it. But I think Eid in Croke Park kind of gave us, this renewed energy. And a sense of belonging, that we do belong here. This is our home, and we have been embraced here. So it was a great honor for us to celebrate our festival in the iconic, historic Croke Park.
Yeah, and I have to say, it was absolutely amazing. I suppose moving on to more recent times, and I have always seen you as a great voice of reason. And as I say, I interviewed you for Taste the Pure Drop. The tragic shooting dead of George Nkankube just early in the new year, it was horrific. And I suppose in the immediate aftermath, people from all sides jumped on this terrible, terrible tragedy to further and push their own agenda. Some politicians included to push their political agenda. And in the midst of all of that, then I saw your video of the sermon that you gave at Friday prayers, and you actually were a voice of reason in the midst of all of the pandemonium and I suppose all of the hysteria. And I actually shared it on my page. It was the first public comment that I made on the issue because I just didn't want to go there. But I felt, yes, this is something that Shaykh is saying. It actually says what I believe. So for people who haven't watched that video or who wouldn't know what your response was, and I don't want to spend a great deal of time on it, but perhaps you might briefly tell us what your response was.
The death of George was an event, an incident that created a lot of division in our society. And a lot of people, as you rightly said, Anna, they try to push their personal agendas. And as humans, we always, when we look at things, when we assess things, we always do that with a particular mindset. We all have prejudice. We have a mind, an image that we have made of people that are different to us. And unfortunately, that image that mostly we make is not really an accurate image, and it is mostly very false. We believe about that the other person, the stranger, is perhaps an enemy to us, and all these kind of, I think, perceptions and prejudice that we have, they have an effect into the response that a person has. The tragic death of George and Kensho that took place in the early years of this year, there are so many perspectives to it. First and foremost, it is a tragedy that a young person has been killed. Also, it is a tragedy that straight after the killing and the death of this person, there were people that falsely accused this person of having been a criminal, having a criminal background, and so many false rumors, false and fake news was being spread. On the other hand, there were people that were so quick to jump on the and say that this was a racist attack. And I think both camps were making a terrible mistake. I think both people, both camps, those that called this a murder, a racist murder, and those that said he deserved what he got, both were making a terrible mistake because they were all creating division in the same society that we both are part of. Both camps are part of the same society. So I found that it is really important to try to build a bridge between these camps. And I responded and I said, look, we have to wait until the GSOC has completed its investigation before we have any remark regarding this incident. But one thing is for sure, and that is that a family has lost their son. Now, it appears that George had mental health issues, and I, straight 2 days after his death, did mention that in the sermon, that, mental health is a factor that has definitely, I believe, a role. And it turns out it did play a role, because I did find it very difficult to comprehend for a person that has a kitchen knife, a knife in their hand, and who sees 15 Garda around him, surrounding him, and yet he doesn't put the knife down. I find that a sane person would not have the same response. A person that is not affected by mental health would not respond in that manner. He would put that weapon down, but George did not do so. So I think that at that time I thought mental health has played a role, and it turns out that George was in fact being treated for mental health issues. So irrespective of the circumstances, I think people have to understand that someone who could be, our family member, someone who is affected by mental health, that person has died now. A family is suffering right now. And at the same time, the guards that were performing their duty, for them, it was also not an easy thing to do. I mean, guards have a very difficult job. Guards that are basically, that protect us, that are there to protect us, they have to sometimes take very quick they have to respond very quickly in the blink of an eye in very dangerous situations and circumstances. And sometimes these reactions are not right. Sometimes they are the best reaction. And I think it's really up to the GSOC to conclude their investigation and then present their investigation and the results of that before we come to any conclusion. I think it's too early, but one thing for sure, that this is our society. We are all in this together. We're all Irish people that live in Ireland, that have made their Ireland their home. This is our society. And people, when they see someone of a different color, or when they see someone, because I happen to be a Muslim, and they say, well, go back to your own country, they have to understand that for an Irish person to say this, it is disgraceful for an Irish person to say to someone whose parents or who has themselves migrated from another country to Ireland to make, a better future, to say, go back to your own country. It's extremely disgraceful, because it means that as an Irish person, you are ignorant about your own legacy, ignorant about your own history, because Ireland as a country is, immigration and Irish, there is a whole history about that. Look at the millions of Irish in America. Look at the millions of Irish in England and in Australia and other parts of the world. Irish people, the majority of Irish people, they understand this, and this is why they are very embracing, very welcoming, because they know, and I think it is their response that highlights that Ireland is really Céad Míle Fáilte, a country of 100,000s of welcomes. And if there are people that say otherwise, they really need to look at their Irishness, because there is something wrong. Maybe they need to be taught some history lessons.
Okay. I suppose some of the accusations that are levelled at people who are the new Irish, the accusations that are thrown out on social media, and indeed said face to face to people who are living here, you're robbing Irish jobs, or you're taking Irish houses, we have our own homeless. What would you say to people who really believe that that the new Irish are depriving them of employment or depriving them of a home?
I think these are just cliches. The truth is that when you look at the new Irish, go to the hospitals, for example, go to these IT companies in Ireland. Many of the workers happen to be new Irish. Many of the workers happen to be migrants that have now made Ireland their home. You could go to the meat factories, for example, and you see a lot of people working there that have, that were born in another country, but now they have made Ireland their home. And we have to understand that these people, they bring with them talent. These people, they come here and they perform certain duties and certain jobs, where they not only are fulfilling the demand that the Irish job market has, but also they are people that also pay taxes to the government. And the majority of people that come to Ireland are such. I mean, you can go to the hospitals. I know hundreds of doctors that happen to be, even when I came to Ireland in 2003, I still remember when I used to go to the countryside, even in rural Ireland, or even around Dublin, surroundings of Dublin, and I was in, let's suppose, shopping centre of Blanchardstown. I remember many times when people used to talk to me or address me, they used to say doctor. Although I was not a doctor at that time. I did my PhD later. I have never been a medical professional, but people assumed because I was Asian, I had an Asian skin, and they assumed I was a doctor, because most of the people that were working in hospitals happened to be from other nationalities that had come and made Ireland their home. So I think it's very wrong to say that these people come to Ireland and take our jobs. On the other hand, when it comes to these people come to Ireland, most of the migrants are professionals. They work in the IT industry, they work in the healthcare, and these are people that actually, they rent homes or they purchase homes. It is very wrong to say that, they are coming here to take over our jobs or our homes. But at the same time, there are also people that have been here that have lost their jobs, for example, have been made homeless, because they are humans like anybody else. They have human problems, challenges, etc. So if someone happens to be born in another country, that does not mean in any way that the state does not have a duty of care towards them. As soon as someone becomes a citizen, as soon as someone pays his taxes and later on becomes naturalized, the state has a duty of care towards them. And the state does not discriminate between those that have the white skin or those that have a yellow skin or a brown skin. For the state, it's about Irish citizens, and citizens are all,
yes,
whether irrespective of their faith and irrespective of their race.
Okay. Unfortunately, I have to kind of bring our conversation to a close, and there are a few topics that I would like to have had the time to cover with you. I suppose one of them is the prejudice that people have about Islam and the role of women. Maybe that's something that we might pick up on in the second half of the programme. But I think you are the living embodiment of the fact that Islam is a religion of peace, contrary to what a tiny minority might believe. So, Shaykh, I just want to thank you so much for that, and we'll be coming back to you again in the second half of the programme.
Thank you very much.
Before I move on to my second guest, actually, I want to give a plug for a podcast that I listened to this week, which ties in very much with tonight's discussion. It is Blind Boy interviewing Manchin McGann. And I have to confess, it was my very first time ever to listen to a podcast. And I was just blown away by this podcast. And I cannot recommend it highly enough. But I suppose the parts of the podcast that are relevant to tonight's discussion, first of all, Manchin is a scholar, extremely well read, and of course, he's probably one of the #1 experts on the Irish language. He has just published a book, 50 names for fields in Irish. What he was saying is that when you examine the Irish language, that the words that there are words in Irish that are actually common to words in Sanskrit, which is the language of India, and indeed in some of the words that are used in the Arabic languages. And another point that he made is that the DNA evidence is showing that we are the descendants of two groups of people, the people from the Bronze Age and the Celts. And the people from the Bronze Age actually came from North Africa. And the Celts, of course, migrated to Ireland from Central Europe. So in actual fact, part of our DNA, when examined, shows that that part of our origins is in North Africa. So a very, very interesting podcast, and I'd really recommend it. And so to my next guest tonight, Mer Tim. Mer is a human rights activist, and I've got to know Mer through her activism with AFRE, and of course our radio series Taste the Pure Drop was made in conjunction with AFRE, and AFRE, Mer has close associations with AFRE, which is a human rights organisation. So Mer, unfortunately, in my introduction to Shaykh, I got his name, I stumbled over his name. So thankfully, your name is short and sweet, Mer Tim. Yes?
Very short and sweet. Yeah, it's the Nuer tribe in South Sudan.
Yes.
My first name means tears, I was named after my grandmother, and my surname means to reminisce.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so your origins are in Sudan. So maybe you might tell us a little bit about your background, your childhood, and I suppose your journey that resulted in you coming to Ireland.
Okay. Well, I was born in Kenya, in Nairobi, Mombasa. Maybe at the time I didn't fully understand my full background. It was a very happy childhood, very I don't know, just very fulfilled in every way, educationally, mentally, just everyone was good to me, and I was an inquisitive child. I explored. My father was amazing. My mom was very strong as a woman. That would be my only recollection of that time in Kenya. And then we moved to Sudan, and then we moved to Kenya. No, sorry. And then we moved to Egypt I was at the age of 5 when we moved to Egypt. That's when I understood that my father was a diplomatic figure, because he had an attempted assassination on his life when I was 3 years of age, when we were in Kenya, which was staged as a carjacking. And they asked him to beg for his life, and he understood that he would have had what people would believe were very westernized ideologies of women not wanting to, women shouldn't be controlled, and a man becomes a man when he decides to, not when he's forced. And so that's what that was what he wanted for me and my two siblings. That's what he had wanted. So he wanted education and he wanted freedom, which is such a hard thing to grasp. Lately, I feel like that's the primary thing that we hope for the next generation anyway.
Okay. Now, I believe that your dad is of royal birth. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, he's a prince. There's a documentary. He actually has a documentary, and it's called The Price of Survival. I'm sure you can find it on Google. And he's writing a book at the moment, just on our history, the province of Sudan, South Sudan, and the war, because South Sudan is one of the newest countries in the world. So he explains that, and it's got very long-standing civil war.
Okay, and so it was ultimately his flight from war that he took his family to Ireland. So tell me a little bit about your arrival in Ireland and what happened to you when you got here.
Yes, well, we took the plane over from Egypt. When I was on the plane, I realized that I never got to see the pyramids. As a little 9-year-old, we left the day after my 9th birthday on the 27th of September 2004.
Okay.
We left we went to France. That's where we stopped off, and then we came to Ireland, and it was cold. And I realized I was African.
Okay. So the first thing that hit you was the cold.
Yes.
And I know that a lot of asylum seekers and refugees end up in what we call direct provision centres. Was your family able to avoid that, or did you end up in a direct provision centre?
Well, that's the thing. Now I'm fully getting a grasp of what that system is. But when we came over, I was directly put in a direct provisional place, which I think was called Balsiskin Center.
Yes.
Yes. We stayed there. It was happy. I remember it was happy times. We had playground. I mean, for how long it went on, it's not the most stabilizing idea for a child, but I don't know what
think,
more to say to that.
okay, I think your internet is on a go slow there, Mer. Are you still hearing me, Mer?
I can still hear you. Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh yes, no, that's a little bit better. So you went to school here in Ireland and you were educated. Tell us a little bit about your journey through Irish school.
I loved my education system in Ireland. My father was very helpful with just teaching us. He's a very smart man. He's very educational. He understands the fundamentals of learning. So I felt like I was very blessed, and I already had a few languages. So I wasn't very good with maths. I'm not very mathematical, but I'm quite good at learning other topics. I like languages. But anyway, I felt the education system has always been amazing in Ireland. It's just when you're willing, people always give you the way. It's there don't seem to be that many block offs with access to even the leveling of schooling. You can always find your way, you can make your way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not too, that's the one area that's not too money based.
Right.
Or private schooling, of course. But other than that, once you've got the itch, people let you. So I always loved that about their schooling.
And of course, you then went on to become an Irish citizen. When did that happen?
I became nationalized, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, naturalized. It was easy enough. We had a speech at the start of it, taught us about the Constitution, how welcoming people are, and I love Irish people. They're very kind. They're very welcoming. I don't know, but I felt very honored to be welcomed into that society. Just I know from coming from so many different cultures, experiencing so many different cultures, that is the number one thing you want as a migrant in integration, is to feel like one of the people, to feel welcome, to feel wanted, to not feel like an intruder, and then to feel like a participant, you know.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel, as a new Irish person, that you are welcome all the time, or are there some difficulties?
There are some difficulties. Sometimes I feel, just being as a sometimes I can be quite affluent. I'm very well spoken sometimes. I understand my full rights as a human being. So sometimes I can seem like I have the audacity, and some people don't seem to understand it because in their head they put me in a role of the other, the minority, you know. And even when they don't dislike you for that reason, or they don't have any evil intent towards that, you are still meant to play a part where you don't overstep your mark. You don't make your presence overfelt. You know, that's what I've always felt, that you're meant to minimize yourself just a little bit, because you should be so thankful that you're even allowed. So that's something that I've always battled with, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how nice you are. It doesn't matter how beautiful you are. It doesn't matter how intellectual you are. It doesn't matter how well educated you may be. It doesn't matter how ambitious you are. Anybody will test you just based on the fact that you are the other. You are the minority.
Right. Right. And that is quite painful. Well, Mer, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your life journey with us. And we will be coming back to you in a little while when we are discussing the hot topic. And I suppose, yeah, and I suppose your life journey just smashes the stereotypical image that some people may have of the new Irish.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my next guest is Julie O'Reilly, and Julie is a traveller activist here in the Midlands. Julie, you're very welcome.
Thanks so much, Anne.
And I suppose you and I have had long discussions in the last week, and you know, I suppose Irish people, some Irish people are guilty of discrimination against travellers because of their culture. And I suppose that ties in with the discrimination that we see in Ireland against people of different race or different religions or different culture. So, Julie, perhaps we might begin by chatting to you about your childhood and growing up as a traveller.
So I was brought up in a house. I had 7 brothers and 2 sisters.
Yes.
I had a mom and dad that showed me equilibrium. So what my mom could do, my dad could do, and what my dad could do, my mom could do. But the most exciting parts of my childhood was being tucked away in the summertime and participating in my cultural heritage and living on the side of the road for the summer holidays. It was never in campsites. It was always traditionally on the side of the road. And during that time, you would experience the campfire. And the campfire was something very special in our culture, because in the evening times, my grandfather, he was a fantastic storyteller, and he would also play the spoons, and he was a fantastic whistler as well. But during the story times, we'd have the sky full of stars as we were listening to the beautiful stories and fascinating ones that he would tell. And the elderly women would be combing our hair and getting us ready for bedtime. But usually there was no bedtimes. We fell asleep to the stars and were carried inside then to go to sleep. Also, I remember long walks with my father and grandfather on beautiful countryside roads. And I would pick little flowers on my journey down the road. And my dad said to me, Julie, you shouldn't pick those flowers because they're going to die. They're better in the ground. So what you can do when you walk along the road is pull the grass seed and spread it on the banks. And therefore you're helping something to grow rather than killing something. And I've took that with me my whole life. I still do it to this day. When I go for my walks, I pull the grass seed and I spread it where I go. And he really showed me the importance of creatures and animals and how to be caring, how to be loving and very, very kind. So, you know, and we have our own language as well. And that's...
Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, so I'm going to speak some for you. So a birth in Egypt, a nucht, a who, a granard air tribly. To all people, we are family. So,
oh, that's beautiful.
And we got to speak that a lot when we were with each other. And as a child, I would remember that. But when I went to school, I was told that I wasn't to speak cant anymore because nobody would understand me. And that was quite hard for me to remember to stop speaking cant and only to speak English at those times. But I did it against my natural tongue. And also, I would go with my parents. My father was a salesman, a very good salesman, and a very kind-hearted man as well. And each week, these elderly ladies would wait for me, and I would do a song or a dance or a story for them, and they would buy me either a dolly or a hug or a kiss, or teach me how to draw. And these were settled individuals. These were beautiful ladies, and they really showed me from such a young age how much love there was there. From certain parts of the settled community. I always remember those ladies. There's not a day that I don't think of them or say a prayer for them. And they set me up really good for school, because when I went to school, things changed for me quite drastically. And I was very outcasted as well. Kids kind of didn't want to play with me. I was mentally and physically abused in school as well. I wasn't taught the Irish language as well. So I felt very segregated growing up. And this was like from 1989 up until 1997. By the time I was 12 years old, from being took out of classes from a very young age, and most travellers will tell you the same story as I have, we would be put into less learning, more so than active learning. And I was 12 years old and I could hardly read or write. And I took that into my own hands then. And I would get the cassette tapes from the library with the library books, and I would teach myself how to do this. And I went on and I did my Leaving Cert, and I got different qualifications, but it wasn't easy for me. And as I'm aware right now, it's not easy for a lot of our cultures. And it can be if you're willing to learn and you're willing to do these things, but that's not always true, because at the end of the day, you look at a child in first class from the settled community and they can read and they can write. And you look at travellers in our community, maybe fifth and sixth class, and they can't, a lot of them can't, you know. So that's something that really needs to change as well, I think, for us, you know, and it needs to be spoke about as well.
Okay. I know that Stephen put up some photographs that you sent us, so I'm going to ask Stephen now just to put up these photographs just one at a time, Stephen, and perhaps Julie, you can tell us a little bit about those photographs. Now, can you see the photographs there, Julie, on the screen?
Yeah. So the first lady with the little baby hands is my grandmother, Sally. And she was a very open, kind and loving lady. And she taught my mother truly to be open to all different cultures, to be accepting and to be loving. The second photo is actually of childhood, going to school. And the third photo is actually my grandmother, O'Leary, Peggy, and she was from Athlone originally, and she was a quite strong woman and a great character, very, very funny, very loving as well, and very outspoken.
Yes. And there's some more photographs there, Stephen. We can move them along. Yes.
So that's myself and my sister, and that was actually the day that we were going to travel to Ballymatton to stay for a couple of weeks during the summer. So that's just literally before we took off. And the next is my Holy Communion with my mom and sister. That was a good day. And this, my granddad, on both sides, on both photos is him when he's younger and older. He was an antique dealer, and he was also very, very wise. He would take certain flowers and herbs and stuff from the ground, and he would be able to like heal. My mother was talking about a time where she cut her leg, and he packed her with these special herbs and stuff. So he had that great knowledge, and the leg completely healed up. Something that we've lost as well in our culture, unfortunately.
He's so handsome.
Yeah, he was such a character as well, such a loving, open man. I was blessed to have them and to experience what I did through them. It was just a wonderful time that I long for, that's long gone, unfortunately.
Julie, just to pick up on one of your points there, you were saying, how your grandfather was able to use herbs to, he was a herbalist and was able to use herbs for medicine, and something that's dying out, unfortunately. I suppose the question I want to ask you is it difficult for travellers now to hold on to what is dear to them in their culture, their language, and just the whole way of living?
Totally, because our language at times is mocked, and some of the words are being stolen from us, and we're being told, well, actually that belongs to such a county. That's not actually Cant, and Cant isn't real. It's something made up. So that's quite hurtful to my culture and my tradition, and also it's being less spoken as well amongst us because of the great gaps between us too, and of course with our children integrating into different cultures as well. So that's kind of hard to keep that alive, because I have 2 kids and I married into the settled community, wonderful guy, and so 2 communities, 1 family. I always go on that. So it's hard to kind of constantly talk that to them as well, so they don't forget while they keep the English as well. Also, like, our way of life is criminalized for us. We can't go on the side of the road anymore and experience our true way of living, which is completely free and live off the land. We were native to this country, so we worship the land and the sky, and like the Native Americans, we're very peaceful people. We were not materialistic. We were storytellers, we were poets, we were songwriters, we were singers, we were lovers. We were all of these wonderful things, crafts people as well. And it's very hard to see our culture the way it has turned out for us right now, because as I'm aware, in Cork, you can hire out like an old wagon and a horse and travel, I think, 10 miles and experience that. And that's okay for one portion of the community. But if we were to do that, we're criminalized for it, and we're made to feel ashamed of who we are.
That's very interesting. That's kind of, there's a term for it, and it doesn't come to me. Cultural acquisition, is it? Or, where where one culture takes cultural appropriation. That's what it's called. So it's okay, as you say, for people to hire out a traveller type wagon and go on holidays. But if travellers were to do that, then they would be arrested. Now, I suppose you mentioned there your children, and that I'm just curious to know, what type of Ireland would you like for your children to grow up in, and I suppose the type of Ireland that you would like your children to be adults in say 20 years time, 20, 30 years time?
So the Ireland I would love to see my children in is one that knows difference, sees difference, and appreciates it. That's where they'll gain true knowledge and true understanding of life through the differences of different cultures, different people, and what they experience through their life. It's a total gift to have that in society, one where they are, I suppose, met with compassion, understanding, love, and kindness, and are opened as well, because I think to have children really intellectual, really intelligent, is to have an open mind and allow them to experience everything to the fullest, and to appreciate another culture opening up their arms and their home to them, to divulge their culture to them. I think it's a great gift. It's something that Ireland should really work towards, and it starts in each of our homes. So this is what I teach my children day in and day out. It's nothing special. It's just, this is the way it should be, and I take full advantage of that right now with my children. Equalism is a big thing for me amongst men and women and different cultures. I think it'd be a fantastic Ireland to grow up in, for them and for other children, for all children.
Well, that is an absolutely wonderful positive note on which to end our conversation. And that leads us now, thank you so much, Julie. That leads us now to Peter, who has been waiting ever so quietly and silently in the wings. Peter, what is the hot topic of the week, please?
Well, thanks very much, Anna. And again, just as always, as I say, maybe it's cliched, thanks to Stephen. Fascinating and wonderful contributions there from all of our guests, and very rich contributions. Maybe if I could just pick up on some of the issues in the broader context in which we find ourselves before coming to this week's hot topic, which strangely has knocked COVID from the main headlines. I know that just some things that were mentioned. I know that Mayor talked about, us having the audacity to know our rights, and I think in the current context in which we find ourselves, it's probably important that everybody has the audacity, I think, to be able to communicate, to be aware of their rights, and to communicate the rights. Julie mentioned something I think which is very important as well, and that's to be kind. And the reason I say that is because, we're seeing, I think, around us, and there's lots of anecdotal evidence to suggest that what we've seen over the last year is an increase in levels of anxiety, of depression, and all manifestations of mental illness. So I think it's more important than ever to be kind to people, I think. And I was also very intrigued when she mentioned about the what's referred to as in academia as ethnobotanical knowledge, or ethnopharmacy, if you will, which all indigenous cultures throughout the world have a knowledge of their environment, particularly in terms of herbals and botanicals, and how you can actually derive medicinal substances from the environment. Now, again, that's something which maybe we won't elaborate on, but again, it borders on naturopathy and homeopathy and so on. So again, it's an issue perhaps for another time, but
yes.
Again, it's a little bit relevant in terms of where we find ourselves after the last 11 or so months that we've gone through. This week's hot topic, Anna, is a topic which is extremely relevant, has been for the last 72 hours. It's rare has a topic knocked COVID from the main news headlines over the past year, but this one certainly has, and it's the emerging tragedy of what happened in our mother and baby homes. And I know we are a little bit tight, we're a bit tight on time, I think, but really how I would frame it is by asking the question, in terms of the intercultural context of how conception and pregnancy is treated outside, stable monogamous relationships, how different cultures solve those problems, because these issues occur in all cultures. And secondly, what perhaps is the best way to commemorate the tragedy that is the mother and baby homes, and how can we ensure that it doesn't happen again?
Okay, thank you so much, Peter. So maybe, Shaykh, if I could come to you first, and perhaps we could tie this in with the misconception that people have about Islam and the role of women. Now, I have some very close lady friends who are Muslims, and so they're the most liberated women that I know. But a lot of people labor under the illusion that Islam downgrades the role of women. So, but to answer, I suppose, Peter's question, how, in Islam, and indeed, your background is, I suppose, in Pakistan, how is pregnancy outside of marriage treated culturally?
In Islam, the institution of marriage is very significant. And you find this approach prevalent in all Muslim majority countries, Muslim majority societies. And therefore, a pregnancy out of wedlock is something that is quite challenging in those societies, and it's a taboo, to be honest. However, at the same time, when it comes to those that are in this position, when they find themselves in this vulnerable position that they have conceived, and now they are about to deliver a child, there are very clear guidelines regarding that, and Islam teaches, and I think that this is pretty much also the approach of the church, the essence of Christianity, actually, not the church, the essence of Christianity, which is you can dislike the sin, but never ever dislike the sinful. And I'm not in any way saying and referring to people that were in that vulnerable state, that they were sinful. I'm not saying that, but I'm trying to explain is that these people, whether you agree with it, irrespective of how you look at them, these people are human beings. They deserve compassion. They deserve kindness. They deserve mercy. And Islam is very clear on this, that when it comes to a child that is born out of wedlock, that is still a human being, is still someone with the same rights as any other human being. These women, they were like any other women that were pregnant. Those that were pregnant during wedding, because of wedding, they deserve nothing but love. They deserve nothing but compassion. They deserve nothing but mercy. In my parents' country, because Pakistan is my parents' country, it's not my country. I consider myself Dutch-Irish, never Pakistani.
Yes.
Irish. Pakistan is my parents' country. Now there is a gentleman who established about 50 years ago an NGO. His name is Abdul Sattar Edhi. He established the Edhi Foundation because in Pakistan, like in Ireland 50 years ago, it was a taboo. And for many women, they had no other option than to abandon their child. And what this gentleman did, and what an amazing human being, because he facilitated in various different towns and cities. He put their cradles, empty cradles. And he said anybody that wants to, and it's a very difficult thing, of course, but unfortunately, because of the taboo, because of the challenges, women had no option. So many women put their children. He opened hostels. He opened shelters for women that were in that situation where their family members had abandoned them. And I have met personally many people that were brought up in these shelters and then orphan houses, and they have become now in Pakistan. They are officers in the army, etc. So the point is that what happened in Ireland 50 years ago, in those homes, in mother and baby homes, it was a tragedy. It should not have happened. These women did not deserve anything but compassion, but kindness, but mercy. And it is very unfortunate that people that were supposed to be religious, religion is in fact the one that teaches, compassion and mercy and kindness. But unfortunately also you find people that promote religion, or people that appear to be religious sometimes can also be the ones that are the most offensive towards religious values. So unfortunately, it's a very sad incident. What I think needs to be done is, I think that this tragedy for Ireland is like what for Germany the Holocaust is. In Germany, children are being taught about the Holocaust, so it can never happen again. I think in Ireland, our children, our future generations should be taught about the horrific crimes that happened in the mother and baby homes, and how the government and the institutions were all part of it. And they have, the government has apologized. I believe the Archbishop has apologized also, but I think now we need to teach our children, future generations, of what happened. We need to listen to the stories of these women. There are so many women out there that have been affected, people that have been affected. We need to hear their stories so we can relate to it. And once we hear these stories again and again, we will ensure that in our society, nothing like that ever can happen again.
Okay, thank you so much, Shaykh, for that. And I suppose I would have to say that, unfortunately, as the convener to the Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice, that sadly the unbroken chain of state abuse of birth mothers and their children continues to the present day. But I'm not going to elaborate further on that. We actually did a programme on it already on the Irish Inquiry. But I do think that is a superb idea, as you say, that that now in Germany people learn about the Holocaust and what happened to the Jewish people, and so that it will never happen again. I think it's a superb idea, and it's one that I hope that the government will pick up on. So thank you so much, Shaykh. Mer, I suppose I know that you now see yourself as Irish, but your heritage is in Africa. So could I first of all ask you, what is your knowledge of how pregnancy outside of marriage is viewed in African cultures?
Outside of wedlock, it's pretty much, I suppose, frowned upon.
Yes.
Not very well educated on that part, but I know from my family, based off marriage, you'd be encouraged to be married and then have a child. Outside of that, you're very much so judged, I suppose, like a lot of other cultures. But coming from a very understanding family and a very compassionate family, I had never had to deal with any of the extreme side of the outcome, you know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And
or I fear.
Yes.
Yeah, I never had to fear the outcome in that.
Okay.
Because I knew I'd only be met with understanding and love and compassion.
Okay. And thank you for that. Julie, among the traveller community, is getting pregnant outside of marriage taboo, or what would be the reaction, in the traveller culture to pregnancy outside of marriage?
Well, initially it would be a shock, but there's a rule in our community: we leave nobody behind. And that's a big rule, and that goes way back. And we have understanding and we have kindness towards each other, and that there is judgment, of course, and you'll have that throughout all cultures and all society, but there is that main rule that nobody gets left behind. But what I want to say about the mother and baby homes too, it wasn't just women that had babies outside marriage that was affected by this. My culture was affected by this, and they used to call this man that would go around to collect the children the boogeyman. And he would come around when the parents would be in work picking the spuds or picking mushrooms or whatever the work would be. And if the kids were left alone, this male would come forward and he would tick how many. So there was many travelling children that was stolen, teenagers as well, that was put through this. And I think really for Ireland to overcome this and for it never to happen again, especially what's going on right now with Tusla and that, because I'm well aware of that, is a national day of mourning would be the appropriate way to go about this. So we all recognise the hands that had played in this and the blinkers we put on during it. So it never, ever happens again in this country. And once the government puts a national day of mourning, I think that's definitely a start for it to come into the school systems. But it has to start from somewhere. And it can't just start with and end with an apology, because that's not good enough to the women and boys and little girls that died horrendously and had to live with serious mental health issues throughout their whole life that affected them having children or even marriages. I think a little bit more than a sorry is needed here for this country to move forward with this, and for definitely never to see it happen again amongst the women of this country.
Okay. And I suppose Peter's second question, Peter, can you refresh us on the second question that you put to us?
Oh yes, the second question, Anna, was essentially again in relation to the mother and baby homes. Again, you know, what the first question was what the essentially what is the best way of commemorating it, but then how do we ensure, and I think Shaykh has actually covered this, he's covered this ground already, but how do we ensure that it doesn't happen again? So that was the second part of the question.
Yes, I do think that question has actually been kind of answered. I suppose a question that really I would like to put to the panel is, you know, the mindset in Ireland that drove mothers and children into these mother and baby homes. To what extent is that type of mindset at play in Ireland today that is resulting in people of different race, different religions, different culture being persecuted to a certain extent? So maybe if I could begin with you, Shaykh.
Thank you very much, Anna. I believe this particular mindset, you find it in all segments of the society. And because we have, as I said in the beginning of the program, we have perceived prejudice, images of the other in our mindset, and often these are very negative. And because of that, we respond in a way that is not humane. We respond in a way that is empty of compassion, empty of mercy, empty of kindness. And this is why when people say, foreigners out, you don't belong here, this is exactly what people said to these women. Their own family members said it. Their own neighbors used to say this to them. So this mindset, the mindset that facilitated mother and baby crimes, home crimes, is the same mindset. You find it among the Germans when they were looking down, at the Jews, and they used to say, "You don't belong here." This is the same mindset that people have against people of color. You are from Africa, you must be a criminal. You're a Muslim, you must be a terrorist. And I think if we all understand that, irrespective of somebody's color, somebody's religion, somebody's dress. I mean, the reason I am wearing this dress is because I happen to be in the Islamic Center. If you see me in the shopping center, I could be wearing my Nike or my two-piece suit, or my Nike track suit. So the point is that we should not judge somebody because of their color, because of their religion, because of their sexuality. We should learn from this that we should always be people of compassion, people of kindness. And if we do not agree with the other person, let's understand that the world is full of diversity. The world is full of this, differences. And these differences are beautiful. Imagine you go to a garden, and in a garden, you only have the red color flowers. You only have flowers that are tulips and all are red, let's suppose. I don't think that is as attractive as if you go to the Netherlands and you go to Keukenhof, where they have, flowers of various different colors, rainbow colors, and all of them in a garden in the same space. It's much more attractive. It's much more appealing to the eye. And so is humanity. If all of us were the same, had the same faith, had the same, appearance, had the same skin color, we would not be, that appealing. And I think this diversity makes us appealing. But what we need respect for diversity, and we need compassion and kindness for the other. And that's an important and unfortunately characteristics that are very less found in this day and age.
I think that is just so beautifully articulated, Shaykh, but it embodies everything that I've come to know about you, and I'm just so in awe of what you have just said. So, Mer, what would you like to add to what Shaykh has just said?
Oh my gosh, I absolutely agree. I believe that as a society, we all have a conscious responsibility for ourselves and for each other to make sure that we don't walk into the same problems that cripple society, not to repeat the same problems that isolate one another, that just what, I don't know what the word is, but make you feel that you're a criminal, like he was emphasizing, make you feel like an outsider, just isolate you and segregate you, things that go against the human natural moral compass, just natural constitution, even moral constitution. Because when it comes to racial tension and racial issues, when it's one-on-one, it holds no water, it holds no ground. When you talk to one person individually, there's nothing to compare. What makes you better than me? Because that's the idea of it, is superiority. What makes you better than me? Your money, your finances, your skin color, your kindness, your intellect. We can't, even two brothers that would be from the same womb and look exactly the same, they couldn't compare the same way, you know? So we need to stop that when it comes to idealizing different cultures, and because reality is based off perception. So what we perceive on each other, we need knowledge. The whole point of being a bigot or ignorant is ignorance. The definition of ignorance is a lack of knowledge and wisdom, you know? But you can just educate somebody. You can tell them where you're from. You can tell them what you do. But that's a sole responsibility of each individual, to each culture, each personality. Everybody has that cognitive decision to make. But some people may want to be lazy sometimes. But these are the problems that we need to, as a society, as a tribalism, to not run into individually or collectively, or to not lead or misdirect each other. Because we do that a lot based off hurt, based off misunderstanding. We will collectively gather these type of biases that we know, as humans, we know what's wrong, you know? We know what a bias can be, but yet we can still push against it if you're hurt or if you're not understanding something, because the main objective is communication.
Okay, and I think that is a really, really good point, that communication, good communication, is the key in helping us to overcome our differences. And I just want to thank you for that, Mer. And now the final word to you, Julie. Can you just, I suppose, respond to what you've just been listening to, and I suppose we've almost forgotten the original question, but the original question being to what extent, you know, that mindset that drove women and children into the mother and baby homes, to what extent is that the mindset that is causing us, or causing some people, to discriminate against people on the grounds of race, colour, religion and culture?
So unfortunately, on that level, I wouldn't know, you know, to say that, but it's vast, you know, it is vast. And prosecution doesn't just happen because of the colour of your skin. As you can see with me, you know, I'm quite pale as well. You know, it can happen because of being a woman, you know, your sexuality. It can happen to each and every single one of us. And it is our jobs as the prosecuted to see that we help the future, not one, to become a prosecutor, two, to allow the prosecution to continue. We have an obligation, each and every one of us, the Irish people too, not just Irish travellers or Muslims or African Irish. It's up to all of us, because the Irish was prosecuted, and not so long ago in the 1980s when they went to different countries. It is up to us to learn from our history, to move forward, and also to change our mindsets, not to be so judgmental, to understand when a child comes into this world out of wedlock, it's a true blessing, because that's the creation process of God. And I'm sure the first human beings on this earth that procreated together were not married. You know, he who sees without sin sees through God's eyes. There is no sin. There's only one true sin in this world, and that is not to love, because all else follows when we fail to love.
And that actually is a very, very brilliant point on which to bring our discussion to end. Love is the answer, and love is the way forward. And yeah, so Peter, as always, you like to bring together the various strands of what you've heard to, I suppose, give us a final summing up. Peter, are you hearing me?
My apologies.
Hello.
I'm still unmuted. Yes, I should be coming
Peter.
through now, Anna.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm hearing you now, Peter.
Anna.
Yes, you're.
Yeah.
You're coming through loud and clear.
My apologies to the audience. Yeah. I muted because my laptop's running a bit noisily. So my apologies if I'm not coming through very clearly. Some wonderful contributions there from our guests, from Shaykh, from Mer, and from Julie. And just maybe pick up on something that Julie mentioned there, and it ties in, I think, as well with what Shaykh has said. And this is just my own personal view. And I've always felt that creation of new life, that having a baby isn't the sin. The sin is then the sin is abandonment of the mother and baby. I think that's the sin. The sin is not the creation of new life. Just creation is not taking responsibility for the life that has been created. The other thing I think we probably need to say is the one individual that, our group of individuals that bear absolutely no responsibility in any of this are babies, are the survivors, the people who survived, and maybe to some lesser extent the women, but really they bear no responsibility. You can never blame the children, and that I think everybody would agree on that point. Other than that, Anna, very little to say to add to what our guests have said, but I would just posit this question in terms of learnings from what mistakes that have been made in the past. We're not now about freedom, and part of freedom is an abstraction, and maybe more of us now are realizing what freedom actually means in a more specific context. And sometimes freedom means, or freedom connotes, the freedom to be wrong, or the freedom, maybe if I could rephrase it, the freedom to make mistakes, but also the freedom to correct those mistakes and become a better person. And again, just if I can come back, and the final point I would make is just posit this question. In 50 years' time, after all of us are presumably gone from this life, gone from this world, and we've left it behind, will there need to be another inquiry in terms of what we have seen in more recent times, in terms of how we've all treated each other, and in terms of the power relations and how power has actually affected all of us in the last 12 months?
I think that is an absolutely excellent question on which to end our program and to leave with our viewers. So I would like to thank most sincerely my guests this evening, Dr. Shaykh. I've made the mistake again. I will just say Shaykh, Mer, and Julie, and to you, Peter, as well. I'd also like to thank you most sincerely who have been watching. I would invite you to share this video. I think it will lead to worthwhile discussions, and also to remind you once again to please go to the Irish Inquiry website, to the drop-down box, help us, and you can offer your expertise there or make a donation. And I would like to thank Stephen and his team most sincerely for making the Irish Inquiry available to us to live stream every Wednesday evening. And next Wednesday evening, I will be coming to you at the later time of 9 o'clock. The new time for Centre Ground is 9 o'clock on Wednesday evening. So the Irish Inquiry live streams now on Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays. Tuesday is the Healthy Debate and that will be going out at 9. Centre Ground on Wednesday at 9, and then Finbar Markey's programme, Dr. Finbar Markey, his programme goes out on Thursday night. I think Double Down is the name of that programme, and it will go out on Thursday nights at 9 o'clock. So thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Until next Wednesday evening at 9 o'clock, Bannock Day Arif Galer.